Hello everyone and welcome back to Timberborn! This is episode 7 of the Spillage series, and there has been a new update for the game. In the experimental branch we now have some automation buildings. In fact, we have quite a few of them. In my most recent live stream we checked out all the new features that they have, and there's quite a bit that I want to incorporate into some of my Let's Plays. On March 12th they're going to be releasing Timberborn 1.0, and I am going to be starting a new Let's Play after that release happens. But until then we can use the experimental branch on this series, so we're going to be able to enjoy some of the new features in today's video. A quick recap on the last episode, we started adding in some gravity batteries. We have our first one placed down, we can unpause the second one. We added in some more power supply buildings, we have some windmills and then also some additional water wheels down here. And then we also added a second colony, and they are helping out by chopping down some trees and then also producing some planks. And today we're going to hopefully get them to start growing some of their own food and pumping their own water. We have the water source over here. Once they can place down some dynamite, it's going to clear away some of the bad water. And then adjacent to our colony, we have a few holes, and I think these would be great for getting some fluid dumps set up, and then we can get a lot of crops planted around here. But first we need a path over here so we can actually start placing down some of the foundations. So I'm going to get a path set up real quick and I'll be back in just a moment. And then once the beavers can eventually make their way over here, we can start covering some of these and then getting some farmhouses and fluid dumps placed down. And then for now we can start with some of the basics. We'll just get some carrots and sunflower seeds placed down, and then maybe some potatoes as well. And we are starting to rack up the unemployed bots, so we can unpause a couple of these gear workshops. And although we don't have bots in here, we can switch some bots into other jobs, and then that should free up some beavers to work in those gear workshops. We can toss some bots into these lumberjack flags, because there are a lot of trees that they need to chop down. They are all birch trees, but for now we're leaving them as birch since we don't have the water seep sorted over here. We can't block this water seep because there's some thorns in the water, and then during a bad tide the water seep is going to be producing bad water. So it's a high risk situation if we put a bunch of other trees here that might take a little bit longer to grow up in the event they die off during a bad tide. We do have some crops that are growing up. We can switch these to bots as well. And then we have our explosives factory that now has a recipe. We want to set to explosives. Fireworks are definitely more of a late game thing since it seems like they're really just for fun. And one of the automation items that I want to tackle right off the bat is the chronometer. So this is 150 science. We're going to have to be conscientious of unlocking all these items. But this is going to be used to split the beavers working between fluid dumps. As you can see, this guy's sitting around. He filled everything up and he doesn't really need to be working here at the moment. So instead we're going to get a chronometer placed right next to it. And then we're going to actually automate this job. And we'll link it to chronometer 1, although it seems like it actually pauses it since we have not constructed this yet. So let's turn this off for now, and then we can set the time range. I want to have it set to every 8 hours since we have a 16-hour workday, which is going to mean that half the time this is turned on, then the other half it'll be turned off, and then we can get a relay set up. But we're going to place this relay next to the other fluid dump, and so that is 80 science. So then they'll work on that next. We will eventually have this one linked to this. We have this one, so it inverts the signal. We're going to go through chronometer 1, although I am going to start renaming these because if you add in a lot of these items, it can get pretty complicated trying to keep track of everything. So we'll have chronometer 1 set to fluid dump farm 1. I don't have a great naming convention at the moment, but this at least indicates that it's the fluid dumps. And it looks like they have it all working, so we can have this automated to fluid dump farm. And since it's outside of that 8-hour window, this guy is paused, and it should mean that he'll start working during the next day. And then we have this relay set up. This one is set to fluid dump farm 1, and it inverts it. So if we automate this with this relay, it is still turned on since we are in the back half of the day. And then we can rename this relay fluid dump farm relay 1. Like I mentioned, not the best naming convention, but at least it indicates what's happening. If you guys have any recommendations for naming conventions, please let me know. This is just what I initially think would work, but I'm definitely open to ideas. And we do have a drought approaching in 2 days, and in the last episode we pumped all the water out of here during the dry season, so we're going to add in some more automation. We have a weather station. It doesn't necessarily need to be adjacent to these water pumps, but we do have some space right next to it, so we can get a few weather stations placed down here. This one does require treated planks, and we do have some, so that is excellent. We can get this unlocked. We can have the first weather station placed here. And then what we can do is have all these buildings tied to the weather station. We only want them to be pumping water during the wet season, which they call temperate weather. So this should be a pretty straightforward fix. So now we can automate this based on weather station 1, and then do the same for all these other buildings. Although we do have 2 of these, and our water is looking okay. It's a little bit lower than ideal. But then we can get some of these other water pumpers turned on based off of some other conditions. If we use a resource counter, and then we also use a relay, we can have these water pumpers turn on if it's a wet season and if we're running low on water. Because if we're doing great, we don't need them to sit around all the time. So we can get a relay set up and then also a resource counter, although this one needs to be connected to the district center. So maybe for now we have that placed right here, and then this one will be set to percentage for water. We'll have this set to 80%. If our water stores are not above 80%, then we don't really want these extra water pumpers working. And then we want to switch this relay to be and we'll have the first one set to the weather station. The second one can be set to the water resource counter. And then we can have all of these water pumpers based off of this relay. And then we can just copy settings to these other ones. Okay, I did some troubleshooting. We did switch this to the correct one, but I had them paused so they weren't turning on. But now since we're below that 80% and it is still a wet season, the relay is on, which means all these water pumpers are working. And then we can have this Badwater pump go through an inverter, which is also a relay, and then have that tied to the weather station. And then we can get another weather station set up that activates this Badwater pump. So we can have this guy set right here to a bad tide, and then we can automate this and have it tied to that new weather station. But we just started a drought and you can see that all the water pumpers are now paused. And because that weather station is now off, we can rename this weather station to wet season weather, and then we can have the second one set to bad tide. And then we can rename the relay to extra water pumps relay because this is what turns on the extra ones. But this is going to be very helpful for me moving forward because just in the last episode, I forgot to pause them and then it completely messed up our farm over here and we ended up losing a good amount of food because of it. And now we have some extra workers. We can have some of these inventor sets turned on. And then we can also tie some of these inventor sets to the weather station as well, because when we end up pausing all these jobs, we could turn these back on. So we can get another relay set up right here. This one is going to be an inverter. We'll have it set to not, and then we can have that set to the wet season weather. And then as soon as they construct it, we can have all these tied to it. So that is quite a bit of automation that we worked on. There's still plenty more that we can do. One thing I'm going to do right now is pause this bot assembler since we are losing power pretty quickly. Another tool we could utilize is the power meter. This does require 600 science, but we can use that to start turning on and off some buildings depending on how much extra power we have. And we still have some unemployed bots. We can switch the forester so that we have a bot working there around the clock. And then maybe we also toss them into the builders' huts as well. Something else that I'm thinking about, we have all of this bramble under here that we need to remove, but I don't want the beavers to work on this because it's such a dangerous job. What we could do is if we remove one of these lumberjack flags and then get some stairs set up down here, then we can go to the path and then get a gate unlocked for 200 science. We'll have that set to right here, and then we can have this one set to a new chronometer. So it'll close during the day and then during the nighttime it'll open up. That way that we can only have the bots who are working in the builders' huts work on removing all this. So we can simply place that right on top here. This one's pretty easy. We can just set it to non-working hours and then we can set that to automate and then tie that to this one. We can have this chronometer set to off hours chronometer. And then can you change the gate name? No, I don't think you can. You don't really need to though. It does seem we're running a bit short on gears, so that is another building that we can switch to bots since it's only 1000 science. Although now that I'm thinking about it, we don't really want the Badwater pump tied to the weather meter. We want it tied to how contaminated the water is in here. So instead, we can get a contamination sensor, and then we can place that right underneath here. If the contamination is above 2%, then we can have this one turn on. So we're changing it to be tied to this contamination sensor now. And then unpausing it, you can see it's paused at the moment, since I haven't finished constructing the contamination sensor. But in just a minute it should be functioning, and then it also should stay paused since this is below the threshold at the moment. So it says it's paused because it's tied to this, and we're not at that 2% contamination. So right now the gate is closed because the chronometer is turned off since it's during working hours. And now we can start removing all these resources. Let's make sure we bump them up to highest priority, and then they should not be able to reach them during the daytime. Oh, well, I guess that's not the case. Thankfully we have a bot working here, and then now the chronometer is turned on, so the gate is opened up and we have the bots working on this in the evening. We got a little lucky with this one since we do have a bot working on it. Hopefully he can get through most of it before the day hits, and so that should take care of removing all the bramble now. And then if we hop over to our second district, we actually have quite a few vacant jobs, and then we also have some injured beavers. Let's pause the smelter for now, because I have not checked on these guys in quite a bit. Let's slow things down and start looking at what jobs we have. There are 12 children, and we have quite a few vacant jobs. We need to have a few in the district crossing because that's how they actually get a lot of their resources. We have a couple builders. We don't really need 2 guys working in the lumber mills. We also have a bunch of farmhouses. We can pause all of them since we don't have any water in here. We can bump this up to high priority and then maybe reduce this down to 1 and unpause it. We definitely need to bump the district crossing up, and then we probably also should keep the district center up as well. Looks like this lumberjack flag got rid of all the trees. And then we need to get some water set up for these guys. We can get a pumper placed right over here. This will be the highest priority job. And then we also have this guy who needs to get a tooth grindstone. So now we only have 1 vacant job. So we have these 2 scavenger flags, which are lower. We have one of the lumberjack flags that's lower. So we can afford to add a couple more jobs for the beavers. Having 2 more builders is going to be helpful. I have some additional houses that I want to construct and try and get the population up. And then we are going to need some additional water storage. And then we can have this one set to supply. Although I don't think we have any haulers at the moment, but we can get that sorted out down the road. And we are starting to run a little bit low on power. We have about 30% of the gravity batteries, but if we duplicate these and then have them tie in, that'll give us a good amount of extra power. It looks like we're actually maxed out on planks, so we can pause a couple of these lumber mills. And we are actually running super low on water. We only have 300. That is not looking good. Unfortunately, I think we do need to unpause this water pumper. We can set that to none and get some extra water. I know we're going to be impacting the crops, but food's looking like it's in an okay spot, and we can't afford to have any thirsty beavers. In the meantime, we can replace a couple of these medium tanks, and then we'll get another larger tank set up right next to it. Since we have so many planks in this district, I think it's worth getting a gear workshop so we can start getting some more gears, because gears are in short supply at the moment. So we have a good amount of space that we can plant some crops. We have a lot more room to expand, but for now we can stick with this section. We have our resource counter, which is actually going to be our water quantity indicator. We have this set to 80%. We can bump that up to 95%. So that'll make sure that we have plenty of water stored up for the next wet season. We can also duplicate this large tank. And then heading back to the thorns over here, it looks like the bots are hard at work. They're getting rid of quite a bit of it. We can start to get some levees placed adjacent to the water seep. And then one of the things they did remove from the game was the sluice. Instead they have fill valve and throttling valve. I think we're going to stick with the fill valve for this one. And we can have a couple of those placed right here. But actually we're not going to place them right here. We're going to do something similar to what we have in our main water source, where we have a little bit of a gap. That way we can get another Badwater pump on top of it. For some reason this guy is sitting around. Oh, it's because we don't actually have any water for him to pump. So we can re-automate this back to the weather station. So it should turn on during the next wet season, which is thankfully only in 0.6 days, and we could use it right now. And all the beavers are starting to get thirsty. Thankfully the wet season has begun, and we have some water pumpers who are turned back on. They're really just waiting for the water to actually come out of the water seep. But then we also have this guy who is working, so he's doing his best providing some water for the beavers. We can duplicate this building and get another water pumper set up. And then we have no explosives. Do we have some storage for explosives? It looks like we do, but we probably need to mess with the district crossing settings. We do have the export threshold set to 0%, and then it's something similar in the District 2. So theoretically we should be sending some over here. We have enough Badwater, we're still making explosives. We finished placing them all along here, which we can actually detonate all these. And now we have some water to irrigate this part of the land. We can get a fill valve in here, and then we can have that basically the unlimited depth. And this will just ensure that we have water flowing only into here and never out. We do have all the bramble cleared away, and now we can start to get the sluice system set up, although it's technically a fill valve, not a sluice. So what we'll do for these fill valves is get a contamination sensor and have it tied into this one. We'll have this set to 2%, and then these will be automated based off of that. And then I think we can also have this Badwater pump based off of this contamination sensor. And then we also don't need this gate to be closed anymore. We can leave it set to open. So on the bright side, we're starting to have a lot more food grow up. We don't have a way to process the raw potatoes into grilled potatoes yet. And then we also do need to get some transportation systems set up for them. I do want to get some zip lines constructed. Let's make sure we have enough resources. I am seeing 0 metal blocks in this district. Do we even have storage set up for those? I'm not even seeing storage set up for metal blocks. There's a lot to do in this district. Storage is one of them. I think that we can have this section be our storage area. We'll have production up here, which I am probably going to need to rearrange some of these buildings down the road. And then we have housing is starting over here. Maybe we can spread that in this direction. but we also need to have some fun activities for the beavers. But let's get started on storage. We can start with some large piles. We can upgrade all these to be underground piles down the road, but those are pretty resource intensive, so we can start with the basics. I'm going to add in a second relay, and then we're going to get that one placed right here because I just unautomated these inventors huts since we had a couple beavers who needed a job in this district, and we need to make sure that these will actually unpause if we have any unemployed beavers. So we're also going to get another building constructed that is going to be the population counter, and so we can have this one set so instead of looking at the total population, it'll look at unemployed beavers. And then we don't care about bots in this situation. We want it to be in district mode, so it's only in this district. And so if you have it set to greater than 0, that should be fine. And then we can have this relay set to or. We need to actually remove this population counter. That was in the wrong spot. We can once again set it to unemployed beavers, only beavers, district mode, greater than 0. And then this extra relay can be set to reference our other relay, which is the extra science relay. And then also our population counter, which we can rename that to unemployed beaver counter. Although we could run into the situation where we have one unemployed beaver, and if we had both of these inventor sets tied to the population counter, then it would turn on these buildings, and then we would have no unemployed beavers. So then this science relay would turn off, and then it'd pause these buildings, and then we'd have unemployed beavers again. So we don't want it to be cyclical and basically just rapidly turning on and off. So instead, we need to add in a timer. We can place that one right up here, and then we can have this timer tied to the extra science relay too. We can have this set to ticks. We can honestly just set that to 0, and then the reset would also be tied to this relay. This one I think we'd want to have it set to 1 day, so we can automate both of these. So we currently have no unemployed beavers, but we can change that. Let's switch one of these jobs to bots, so we should get an unemployed beaver. Okay, we gotta switch another one to bots. So this indicated, so why did that not turn on? Oh, we need to actually set these to the right one. So I have it so it turns on when this one turns on, but then I guess it also resets when this one is on. This part is a little bit fuzzy to me. Maybe we have nothing that triggers it, but then it resets based off of this one. Okay, I'm not fully grasping how I want to actually set this up, but for now we're just gonna copy the settings from the other two inventor sets and I have them applied back to this one. We can tackle that at another time, but there's still plenty of other things that we need to work on. On the bright side, we do have the dynamite placed all over here, and then before I detonate it, let's think about what we need to do. We can get some power generated from here, but that's not super important since getting it all the way back up to here is not going to be super easy. And then we do want to have a water pool here because that is currently our water source. We can detonate that, and then we'll also have the Badwater and the water drain out of here since there was some contamination. For now we can get some floodgates set up. We can have these basically raised to the top level for now. I might end up getting some power put in here down the road, but like I mentioned, I'm not going to do that quite yet. But we can use the floodgates for now to remove any contamination from here if that is the case. We also have some more jobs we need to rearrange. We have a couple unemployed beavers, and then we can also remove both these lumberjack flags. We'll toss some into the district crossing for now, and then we never ended up making a hauling post. We can toss that over here. We'll have that set to lowest priority, and then we can bump that all the way up to 10. And we have food galore. We can bump it up to 3 beavers. We still have an unemployed beaver. And we can use the chronometer over here because we have a couple fluid dumps. And then we can go every 8 hours once again. I think we could do either 5 or 6 hours once we get this third one placed down. We will need to add a second chronometer because we can only basically use this as a binary. It's either on or off. And then we'd have that second chronometer control this third fluid dump. And then we can get the relay over here. And then this will be an inverter to this one. We'll have this one set to District 2, and we are 1 letter away from being able to write it down. And then we can start working on getting some zip lines, because that's going to make everything run way more efficiently. And then we'll also need to keep adding in some more housing in this second district. We have 8 vacant jobs, although we do have 8 children, so when they grow up they can fill in a bunch of the jobs in this hauling post. But we do want to be forward thinking, and then make sure we have plenty of workers for the future. We have enough science to get the double dynamite unlocked, and then we're going to fit some housing in right over here. And then back in our main district, I'm actually seeing that we don't have any more scrap metal to collect, so we can remove all of these scavenger flags. And then we can start setting some up over here. And then we have quite a few unemployed beavers and bots in this district. We can, for now, copy the settings to all of these other inventors' huts, since we have plenty of unemployed beavers, and then we have a lot of unemployed bots. One thing I do want to do is toss them into here. 7,500 science is not too bad. And then we're going to earn all that back pretty quickly. And then we still have some unemployed bots. We can toss them into some of these water pumps for now. And then we can also start unmarking these trees to be planted, because we want to switch all these to be oak trees, which are much more efficient. And now that we have this situation sorted out, although we do need to actually place some contamination barriers around. And then we can also place some additional lumberjack flags where we can fit them. And that is where we're going to wrap up today's episode. We tackled a lot with the automation today, and I'm still getting the hang of it. There's a lot to learn, but we'll get to continue to utilize these in the future episodes. And I am super stoked for Timberborn 1.0 to come out. Keep an eye out for a new series releasing soon. So if you enjoyed today's video, please hit that like button. It really does mean a lot to me, and it helps the channel out tremendously. And with that, we will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.